Thank you for joining us again here at the Sword of Empowerment as we continue with the study of the book of Hebrew, chapter number 7. Now, last episode was a little bit difficult because of the whole introduction of the fall away. But I believe we got something, and as we continue with this chapter, we'll be looking at a better priesthood, a better high priest. So this is a very interesting chapter, and it's my prayer that we'll be able to study this chapter together with you, and it will be enriching, and also it will be a life-changing experience as you study the book of Hebrew chapter number 7 with me. Now, the book of Hebrew chapter number 7 has the introduction of a better priesthood and a better high priest. Now, if you go back to our study of the book of Hebrew chapter number 2, we found that Jesus Christ was introduced to us as our high priest. So the writer here explains the theme that he had already introduced way back in chapter number 2, and is trying to bring us again now and give us a better understanding of Jesus Christ as the high priest, and also introduce to us what we call a better priesthood. Now, in chapter number 2, he began by introducing to us Jesus Christ as the priest. And now here, he also goes back to chapter number 5, and he discussed and spent time discouraging Christians about the danger of not continuing or progressing forward in the Christian walk. Now, remember, the book of Hebrew is written to the Jewish Christians. These are Hebrew brethren who had been converted to Christianity. And so those Jewish Christians would be very interested in Jesus as their high priest, but would have a significant intellectual objection to the idea. And so he is trying to bring this knowledge of the Old Testament, and he brings it to their understanding. Yes, the Jewish Christians knew of the high priest because of Judaism. Remember, they were coming from Judaism and had been converted to Christianity. And so they knew of high priest. And if you look at the end life of Jesus Christ, the high priest is not mentioned in good terms. Actually, it is through the high priest that they connive together with others, and they put Jesus Christ on the cross. And so to the Jewish Christian, when you talk to them about the high priest, they had kind of a feeling that they did not want to associate intellectually with that kind of thinking. And so the writer of the Hebrew comes now and talks to them and tries to direct them to actually a priesthood that is better than the priesthood of Aaron. He wants to lead them into a high priest who is better than the priesthood of Aaron. Now, because Jesus did not come from the tribe of Levi, then he has in a way to introduce to us Jesus Christ as a high priest, not only from the tribe of Levi, but he comes from a different, he's cut from a different piece of cloth here, so to speak. So the tribe of Levi was the tribe that we call the priestly family in the Jewish tribes. So there are 12 tribes, and Levi is one of the tribes that leads or brings us the lineage of the priesthood. That is the family of Aaron. So the writer of Hebrew wants to remove those intellectual problems from the Jewish Christians with the gospel, and he brings out the very connection of Jesus Christ and who he is. And so he does not want to leave them with hangovers, but he wants them to embrace the whole gospel, and he wants them to understand that Christ is not just a high priest in the lineage of the Levites, but Christ is a high priest in a different order. Now, this chapter is so important because it shows us the link or it shows us the connection between the Old Testament institution of priesthood and the law. Now, as we move on to study the book of Hebrew, we'll be getting into deeper and deeper things concerning the law. But remember, Paul says that Jesus Christ died according to the scriptures, that he was buried according to the scriptures, and he was resurrected according to the scripture. In another place, Jesus Christ himself in the book of Luke chapter number 23 encounters the two disciples that are heading out to Emmaus. And in this conversation, Jesus Christ, starting with the law or starting with Moses, he started to expound to them, including the prophets and the kings and the psalms, things that were written pertaining to himself. And so this is where we start now getting the connection that the Old Testament become a shadow of the things that are revealed in the New Testament. So in the orders of the priesthood, the Old Testament talks about the lineage of the priest from the tribe of Levi, and gives us an introduction of a high priest who was from the family of Aaron. Now, when we come now to the New Testament, the writer is trying to make a connection, the link. And this is where he starts by talking to us that we know that Jesus Christ is a priest, not in the order of Aaron, but in the order of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek and his relation to the Aaronic priesthood will help us understand the whole picture that is painted in the Old Testament. Now, the first place we come into contact with Melchizedek is in one chapter, is in the book of Genesis, when Abraham is coming from conquering the kings of Sodom, and he meets this man, the priest who had no parents, who had no beginning or no end. He was actually a priest and also the king of Salem, and his name was Melchizedek. And so we are looking here, and let's read verse number 1 and start unveiling, understanding this mystery in the book of Hebrew chapter number 7. I ask you to read with me Hebrews chapter 7 verse 1 to number verse 10. For this Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth of all, first being translated King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, meaning King of Peace, without father, without mother, without a genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priesthood forever. Verse number 4. Now consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoil. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi, who received the priesthood, have a commandment to receive the tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. But he whose genealogy is not derived from the tithe, from them, received a tithe from Abraham, and blessed him who had the promises. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. Here, mortal man receives tithe, but there is he who receives them, not the tithes, the people, to whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithe, paid tithe through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, this is going to be an interesting exposition of these verses. I know when it comes to most people, when we start talking about the tithing and the 10%, there seem to be like a controversy. I was following a conversation some times back when somebody made a comment in the social media and said that that the pastor should stop being greedy and they should share the tithes with other ministers in the church. And I started laughing because I knew that person was trending on dangerous ground, so to speak. Now, he was trying to say, no. It is written in the scriptures that the priest only receives the tithe. Now, as we study this, we're going to realize that you yourself are a priest. And I'm not going to ask this question to embarrass anybody or anyone. Now, if you're a priest, then you need to be paid tithe. Now, that is not the contention of our study tonight. That's just something that I'm just trying to jog your mind. So let's go back here and look at verse number 1 to verse number 3. The writer says that for this Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham when he was returning from the slaughters of the king and blessed him, to him also Abraham gave a 10th part of all of his things that he had taken from the kings. Now, to whom met Abraham returning from the slaughter? After Abraham had defeated the confederation of the kings of Salem, and he had recaptured his nephew Lot, and he has brought him now, he meets a mysterious priest, and the name of this mysterious priest is Melchizedek, who was also not a priest but a king of a city called Salem. Now, this city will later on become Jerusalem. It is a city that David will later on capture and make it the capital of the kingdom of Israel. And I'm using that because I don't want to say Israel. I want to use the old Bible so that you can know what I'm talking about here. Jerusalem was made the capital of the kingdom of David, the kingdom of Israel. And so it is here we hear that Abraham met this priest who was also a king of Salem. The Bible says the king of Salem is translated, or it means the king of peace. What a joy to know that this priest was only a priest that is coming from Salem, and he was a king of peace. So Jesus, who is the Prince of Peace, or the King of Peace, is pictured in this man by the name of Melchizedek. Now, history shows the danger of combining religious and civic authority. Therefore, God forbade the kings of Israel to be priests and the priests of Israel to be kings. Now, let me walk you a line before all this. In the beginning, the office of the king, the office of the prophet, and the office of the priest were inclusive in one man. And we'll see this as we move on, because as we go to the book of Judges, we're going to find a man by the name of Samuel. But before Samuel, there was another man by the name of Moses. Moses was a leader, a king of his people, so to speak. And Moses was a priest, so to speak. And Moses was a prophet because he was the voice of God among his people. And so Moses carried all the three offices in one person. But as they progressed on, the Lord will divide that. He forbade the kings to be priests and prophets, and he forbade the priests to be kings at the same time, to be prophets. And so they became a division, where we find Samuel being the last judge, the last priest, and the last high priest, the prophet of Israel. And so he had the three offices at one. Now from henceforth you find then they became a high priest, there was a king, and then there was the prophets, and those were separated until Jesus Christ shows up in the picture and he becomes our king, our prophet, and he becomes our priest. And so Melchizedek was the king of Salem, and at the same time he was a priest of the high God. And this is a unique exception. This was a unique exception. And that's why the priest of the Most High God, meaning Melchizedek was not merely a worshipper of the true God, he had the honor of the title, the priest of the Most High God. The greatness of God magnifies the greatness of Melchizedek priesthood. This is different from Aaronic priesthood, because Aaron was a priest, or them who became priests in the order of Aaron, they were priests, made priests unto the people of God, unto their God. But now this is one who is elevated. The greatness of the Most High God elevates this position, elevates the seat of the priest of Salem to a higher level. Any priest is elevated according to the status of the deity that they worship or whom they serve. And therefore, Melchizedek was not only a worshipper, but he has been elevated to the priest of the Most High God. And the Bible says, and blessed him. Who? Melchizedek is actually the one doing the blessing. And Abraham gave Melchizedek a tithe, which is a part of all, or a tenth of all. In this case, all refers either to all the spoils of the battle or all the possession of Abraham in totality. But I believe that all here means the spoils of war. Because remember, Abraham is coming from the spoils of war. And he comes with what he heard, and he gives a tenth of all that, the spoils of war, to Melchizedek. But on the other hand, what was left, he did not keep for himself, but he gave it to his soldiers and the people that accompanied him to the battlefield. So, first being translated, the king of righteousness, and also the king of Salem, which means the king of peace. Now, Jesus Christ is our righteousness, and at the same time, he is our peace. The name Melchizedek means righteousness, and the king of peace, which means with Salem, which means peace. Now, the order is subtle. When you look first, Melchizedek's name is very name is the king of righteousness. Then he is called the king of peace. Now, when you look at all this, righteousness will always precede peace. And that's why the Bible says in the book of Isaiah, unto us a son is given, unto us a child is born, and the righteousness of his kingdom will reign forever. Through who? From this son. And the government shall be upon his shoulder. He shall be called a mighty God. He shall be called the King of kings. He shall be called the Prince of peace. He shall be called the Father, the Comforter, and all the names that are given to him in the book of Isaiah chapter number 9. But look here, righteousness precedes the peace. And that's why the Bible is very careful to say in the book of Proverbs, the righteousness of a nation, or the righteousness among a nation, exalteth the nation. So every time there is righteousness within the nation, every time we are dealing with righteousness, then there is an elevation and there is peace that follows, or that follows the righteousness. So righteousness is only a true path to peace. People look for that peace in escape, in evasion, in in compromises and all the things that we can talk about when we are dealing with trying to acquire peace. But actually, when we live a righteous life, when we start going back into righteousness, then we find ourselves fulfilling the righteousness of God, and peace automatically follows righteousness. So, without father, without mother, the Bible says, this is nothing said about the genealogy of Melchizedek. There is nothing that is ever mentioned about his genealogy. Now, this brings me back to another thing in the book of John chapter 1, verse number 1. The Bible says that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Now, John does not start the genealogy of Christ, because he knows, after having stayed with Jesus, that Jesus was not just a mere man. He had man come from God. And so he says this, I am not going to mention his mother. I'm not going to mention his father, because I know he came directly from God. And so there is no genealogy of Jesus Christ in terms of who he is. And that's why the Bible says Melchizedek had no mother, no father. Genesis chapter 14 or elsewhere, he does not talk about the genealogy of this person, but also it brings neither does the Bible talks about the end or the beginning of this man. So he's a mysterious figure that shows up unto Abraham's feet, and all of a sudden Abraham had the promises that the Lord will bless him and the Lord will take him to places. That's why I said chapter number 7 is going to be a chapter that when you understand it, then you will be on the route to understanding the gospel. You'll be on the route to understanding the Old Testament as a shadow of the things that are revealed in the New Testament. So the Bible is very clear, and he's made like the Son of God. Melchizedek was made like the Son of God. It really is that Jesus has Melchizedek kind of priesthood. Instead, Melchizedek has Jesus kind of priesthood. He was a type and shadow of Christ. So for us to understand Christ, then we must understand somebody else that we can relate to. And this is where the Bible makes it clear. In Hebrew chapter number 7 and verse number 3, it brings us this word. It brings us to understand that the word here is active. It's a model. The word here is a model that says unto him, it's likened unto him, a model. Now it was as if the father could not wait the day of his son's priesthood to enter the world. So he introduced to us in the Old Testament in the type and shadow of Melchizedek, so that when Jesus Christ walks into a time and generation, we'll be able to understand his work. Jesus was not born from the tribe of Levi. Jesus was born from the tribe of Judah. And so he is the Lion of Judah, and yet he is the Lamb. He is the King of Kings, and yet he is the righteousness of God. So he is God himself, and he has been made, the Bible says, like unto the Son of God. And the Bible says of Melchizedek priesthood that it is continuous. It is continuous. The priesthood of Melchizedek had no end. Not like Aaron. Aaron's priesthood, he lived and died. And so another one will pick up and continue from where the last one who died left. But the order of Melchizedek has no end, has no beginning, has no end. The priestry of Christ. And this is very important to understand. Because when you understand the priesthood of Christ, and then you understand the sacrifice, we'll be coming to that later. When you understand the priesthood of Christ, and then understand the sacrifice, and then you hear the Bible talks to us that he offered an eternal sacrifice, no end, no beginning. So the sacrifice that Christ ordered, or that Christ offered, was not for one day. It was for eternity. Eternity has no beginning, neither has it no end. And so it remains effective. It remains effective even to today. And so Abraham gave a tenth of the spoil. The sons of Levi have a commandment. Now this is a comparison. The priesthood of Levi received the tithe from Israel as a commandment. Abraham voluntarily gave tithe to Melchizedek. This makes Abraham giving to Melchizedek greater than Israel's payment of tithes to the priesthood instituted by Moses. Did you hear what I say? I say this: Abraham paid voluntarily to Melchizedek a tenth, or the 10%, or a tenth of his spoils. But the children of Israel, or the sons of Jacob, they paid the tithe after it was issued by Moses. So to them it was a commandment they were fulfilling. But Abraham did it voluntarily. Even Levi, who receives tithe, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak. Sometimes we fail to understand the context of the scriptures, and we end up leading them to read what they want them to read. Here the writer is saying even Levi paid tithes, or who receives tithe according to the institution, or what was instituted by Moses, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, the whole tribe of Levi was genetically in the loins of Abraham when he paid tithe voluntarily to Melchizedek. So the priesthood of Levi pays tithe to the priesthood of Melchizedek. So this shows Melchizedek is in a position of authority over Abraham and his descendants, so to speak. Chapter 9 verse 7 verse 9 is important. The writer of Hebrew knows he is making an allegorical point. So he doesn't want to be taken literally. He is just making a comparison here. And he wants them to understand why he's doing this, because at the end of this chapter, he is trying to bring to us to that point of understanding, so to speak. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you, so to speak, Levi paid tithe to Abraham. No, Levi paid tithe, to Melchizedek. Why? Because he was in the loins of his father. What I'm saying is this: Melchizedek has authority over Abraham and his descendant of Levi. So then he goes on to say, as well, the lesser is blessed by the greater. Therefore, Melchizedek showed he was greater than Abraham when he blessed Abraham. On his part, Abraham accepted Melchizedek was greater when he received the blessings. And this is where it is interesting. We need a new priesthood. Therefore, if perfection, verse number 11, therefore, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for under which the people received the law, what further need was there for another priest should rise according to the order of Melchizedek, and not to be called according to the order of Aaron? Then what was it? If all the law of Moses and the perfection and the Levitical priesthood did not bring perfection, then what further was there need for a one to come, not in the order of Aaron priesthood or Levitical priesthood, but comes in an order of a different priesthood, which is the order of Melchizedek? The simple fact is this, that God describes a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, showing there is something lacking in the packaging, in the priesthood of Aaron. There was something that was missing, and that something that was missing was that which is perfect. Christ was not only the high priest. Christ was not only our high priest. Christ was our sacrifice that was given for the remission of sin. Do not forget to subscribe so that we can continue with this topic next time as we tackle verse number 11 and understand the need for a new priesthood. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May He shine His face on you and continue to uphold you with the right hand of His righteousness. God bless you.